He wasn't supposed to become king. Rome had built an entire system to make sure no one ever could again. Power was divided. Authority was limited. No one man was meant to control everything. And for centuries it worked, until one man proved it didn't. Because Julius Caesar didn't just rise within the system, he moved through it, learned it, and understood exactly where it could be bent. And once he reached the point where it could no longer hold him, he didn't stop. He broke it. Julius Caesar is often remembered as a conqueror, one of Rome's most successful generals, a figure defined by military victories and expansion. But that's not what made him dangerous. Rome had seen powerful generals before. It had survived rivalries, internal conflict, and ambitious leaders who pushed the limits of influence. What it hadn't seen was someone who understood how to convert influence into control, and control into inevitability. Because Rome wasn't ruled by a king. It was ruled by a system. A structure designed to balance power, limit authority, and prevent exactly what Caesar would become. And yet, he didn't attack that system directly. He didn't overthrow it from the outside. He moved through it step by step until the system itself began to reshape around him. The Roman Republic was built on a principle that defined everything else. No kings. After removing its last monarch, Rome constructed a framework designed to prevent that concentration of power from ever returning. Authority was divided across institutions, consuls shared leadership. The Senate guided long-term decisions. Terms were limited and roles rotated. It wasn't perfect, but it created balance. And that balance allowed Rome to grow. But as Rome expanded, the rewards of influence increased. Wealth flowed in from conquest. Military success elevated individuals. Political competition intensified. And slowly, the system began to shift, not in structure, but in behavior. Because systems like this rely on restraint. They depend on the people inside them choosing not to take too much. And over time, that restraint began to weaken. Not all at once, but enough. Caesar's rise was not sudden. It was calculated, gradual, and deeply connected to the structure of Rome itself. He understood early that influence in Rome did not come from a single source. It came from a combination of visibility, alliances, and perception. He built relationships carefully, aligning himself with powerful figures while also cultivating support among the public. His speeches were deliberate, his actions were visible. But it was his military command that changed everything. His campaigns in Gaul were not just victories, they were transformations. Year after year, his forces expanded Roman territory, pushing deeper into regions that had never been fully controlled. The scale of these campaigns was immense. Long marches through unfamiliar terrain, constant engagement with opposing forces. But within that environment, something else was forming. His army became more than a military unit. It became loyal to him. They fought under his command, depended on his decisions, and shared in the outcomes of his victories. Their success became tied to his leadership. And in a system built to distribute power, that concentration of loyalty began to shift the balance. Back in Rome, the implications of Caesar's success became increasingly clear. The Senate observed not just a general returning from campaign, but a figure whose influence extended beyond traditional limits. A general with victories was respected. A general with loyal armies was a risk, and Caesar was both. Efforts were made to contain that influence. Political maneuvers, alliances, strategic decisions, each aimed at maintaining the balance the system depended on. But the system had a limitation. It could regulate authority within its structure. It struggled against someone who operated across multiple layers of it. Caesar moved between military command, public support, and political influence with increasing control. He didn't challenge the system directly. He expanded his position within it until those positions began to overlap. And as they did, the distance between him and the limits of the system continued to shrink. The moment came when the system demanded a boundary. Caesar was ordered to relinquish command, to disband his army, to return to Rome not as a general but as a private citizen. It was a restoration of balance. a final assertion of the system's authority. Because if he obeyed, the structure held. If he refused, it didn't. Caesar understood the significance immediately. This was not a decision about position. It was a decision about power itself. To comply meant losing everything he had built. To refuse meant crossing a line that could not be uncrossed. For a moment, the system still existed. It still had authority. It still had the ability to hold him within its limits. And then, he crossed the Rubicon, not just as a physical act, but as a transformation. From participant to challenger, from within the system to beyond it. From that point forward, the Republic no longer functioned as it had before. Because now the question was no longer whether power could be balanced. It was who would control it. The consequences were immediate but not simple. Rome did not collapse overnight. It fractured. Alliances shifted rapidly, leaders chose sides, armies mobilized. The system that had once balanced competing interests now became the arena for them. Caesar moved with precision. He understood momentum, how quickly advantage could build if not interrupted. Each decision was designed not just to win, but to prevent recovery from those opposing him. Opposition forces attempted to regroup, to reassert control, to preserve what remained of the Republic. But the structure they relied on was no longer stable. Because once power begins to concentrate, systems built on distribution struggle to respond. Caesar advanced, not recklessly but decisively. Each victory reinforced his position. Each movement reduced the ability of others to counter him. And slowly, the conflict shifted from uncertainty to inevitability, because by the time the system fully recognized the scale of the threat, it was already too late. When the conflict ended, Caesar stood at the center of Rome, not as a participant in its system, but as the figure it now revolved around. He was granted authority beyond traditional limits, titles accumulated, roles extended. Eventually, he was named dictator for life. The structure of the Republic still existed, but its function had changed. The Senate remained, offices remained, but the balance was gone, because power had consolidated. And once power is no longer distributed, the system it was meant to protect cannot operate in the same way. Rome had not formally become something new, but it was no longer what it had been. Those who believed in the Republic recognized the shift, not just in Caesar's position, but in what it represented. They saw a system that had failed to contain power, and they believed they could restore it. So they acted, not as enemies of Rome, but as defenders of what it had once been. In 44 BC, Caesar was assassinated, a decisive act intended to reverse what had happened, to remove the source of imbalance, to restore the system. But systems do not return to their original state so easily, because once the balance is broken, the structure that depended on it cannot simply be reset. And the consequences of that moment would extend far beyond the act itself. Caesar is often remembered for what he achieved, his campaigns, his victories, his rise to power. But his true impact was something deeper. He exposed a limit, not in individuals, but in the system itself, because Rome had been designed to prevent exactly what happened. And yet, it still happened. Which raises a question that extends beyond Rome. If a system built to prevent dominance can still be reshaped by one individual, then how stable was it ever? And maybe the answer isn't that Caesar broke the system. Maybe it's that he revealed it, showed where it could bend, and proved that once it did, it would never return to what it was before. Sounds fake? It's history. Subscribe for more real history that sounds fake.